Hello students, welcome to Legacy IAS Academy. Today we are going to talk about a recent fast development that has happened in the Middle Eastern region, and that is in the country Syria. So the country's president Bashar al-Assad, as per the latest report, has fled the country and has been given the what we can call as the protection status in the Russia. Now with this, many experts are arguing and are talking about that whether this development means the end of the decades-long civil war that has been going on in the Syria, or it is just a beginning of a new phase. So let us try to understand this in more detail, that what has happened in last 1 week and what are the dramatic changes that has happened basically in last 1 week. So why this particular area or the country is news? Because after almost 15 years of civil war that began somewhere in the year 2010-2011, the final push that was done by the rebel groups that were made up of several different factions and organizations, we're going to talk about them in the later part of the video, have been finally able to successfully overthrow the dictatorial regime of the Bashar al-Assad. And this has happened in just almost 15 days. It was the 27th of November. That is when the major attack culminated against his regime. And on the December 9th, finally the rebel groups were able to take control of the capital city of Damascus, and this Bashar al-Assad has to flee. Now, as per the report, he has been granted asylum in Russia, and obviously it is understandable because Russia and Iran were two major staunch supporters of the Assad's regime in Syria. They have helped Assad in earlier time to fight and wage a war against rebel group, and that is why he was able to remain in power for almost a decade even after the revolt. Now, this basically is not only the end of the Assad's regime, but it also end the 50-year of his family's rule. Before Assad, if talk about his father, Hafiz al-Assad was also the main ruler and dictator of this Syria, and so kind of iron fist rule that the family had over the Syria that has come to end after a 13-year-old civil war. So let us try to understand first of all the geographical location where Syria is situated. So as we can see from the given map, the green region is the Syria, and it is a region in what we can call as the West Asia, also called as Middle East, and also it is a region that is also known by the other name of Levant or Sham. Now, if we talk about Syria, it has a coast that opens toward the Mediterranean Sea. On the northern side, it is bound by Turkey. On the east, as we can say, it is bound by two countries, that is Iraq and Jordan, and further in the west it is bound by countries such as Lebanon. And this is very important because actually if we talk about Iran is situated further in the east. So the Iran's only way to access the Palestine region, or what we can call as the Gaza Strip, was through Syria. So the major blow is not only for the Assad, but this development also has caused a major blow to the Iran as well as Russia, who were able to exercise their influence in the Middle East through the Syrian what we can call as the government. So why Syria was in the midst of civil war? If you look at the historical development, as we have discussed, since 1971, Hafiz al-Assad, who was considered as the all-powerful president ruling Syria in a dictatorial fashion, basically, and also his rule came to end in 2000, and that is when Bashar al-Assad took over. Now, interestingly, he was not the first person or preference to rule the country. It was only after the death of his elder brother, there was no other choice left, and he come to take control of Syria. Now, in 2011, we know that in the entire Middle East and North Africa region, for example, we talk about countries such as Tunisia, we have Egypt, we have Libya, we have a revolution that began against the dictatorial regime, a revolution that was fueled by the economic factors, fueled by the lack of political what you can call as the lack of freedom to exercise their individual rights and all, and especially driven by the youngsters and the developing social media at that time. Social media platforms, we talk about Twitter and all that, they were in the early stage. So this fueled a kind of revolution that is generally referred by the term Arab Spring, and the Arab Spring also reached Syria. And interestingly, many experts and people used to think that Bashar al-Assad will not respond in a dictatorial manner, it will not respond in what you can call as a brutal manner, oppressive manner against this revolt, because he was considered as, especially in the early time, as a kind of more liberal leader. Also because he has got his education from the England, he was a practicing ophthalmologist there, and he also married a British born citizen. So because of this kind of personal life, his influence was believed or was expected to be more liberal, but that did not turn out to be true. Assad also brutally repressed and crushed any kind of revolt and rebellion against his regime by the government, and that is what we can say lead to the beginning of civil war in Syria that lasted for more than a decade. Now, if we talk about the protest, what is the main ground of protest in Syria? So, we have to understand first of all that if you look at the religious composition of Syria, we have two different sects of Islam that are residing here. Majority of the people living in Syria belong to the Sunni sect of Islam, while the minority group belong to the Shia sect. Now, we talk about the Bashar al-Assad and his family. They belong to the Alawite sect, which is a part of Shia sect. And Sunni Islamic people or Sunni Muslims who make a majority of the country's population used to believe that most of the jobs, resources, power, everything is concentrated in the hands of minority, that is Shia, while the majority Sunni people are being discriminated against. So this is also what we can call as a kind of protest began as a Shia versus Sunni or because of the Shia versus Sunni conflict. Second, as we have discussed, same discrimination on the basis of identity. Most of the power, resources, money was captured by the political elites, and the elites were close to the Bashar al-Assad. And due to this mass at a large scale, at mass scale, if you talk about, there was a burgeoning problem of the inflation, many times hyperinflation, price rise, as well as unemployment among the youth population. So the entire revolution or revolt began by the large scale participation of dissatisfied youth. And that was a common theme not only in Syria but across all the countries where the Arab Springs has basically taken its foothold. Now, obviously, as a result of this protest and revolution, what Assad did, obviously, that what a dictator does. So he brutally cracked down on the protesters, and agitation soon spiraled into an armed civil war, where the protesters were being supported by the United States government at that time. They were able to get funds, they were able to get weapons. On the other hand, the Assad regime was being backed by two powerful countries, that was Iran and Russia, and also Iran has sent the Hezbollah fighters to go and fight in the Syria to help and support or prop up the Bashar al-Assad's regime. So if you talk about the civil war, there were many fighters and there were many factions, many internal fighters, many external fighters, and overall if you talk about, though they had different goals, different agendas, their main aim was to force Assad to step down, and this is the common goal that has bound or that has basically brought all the rebel groups, rebel factions together. In 2015 also a major offensive was launched against the Assad regime, but because of the help provided by Iran and Russia, Assad was able to quell the rebellion, or basically what you can say, crush the rebellion. And that is why a truce was signed in 2020 due to the mediation of the Russia, and a civil war that began few years back, decades back, went into the state of a frozen conflict until now on November 27, when you have a sudden surprise attack launched by the rebel factions, largely led by HTS, that is the Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. Hayat Tahrir al-Sham is the major faction, most dominating faction today, most dominating rebel group today that has been leading this rebellion and fight against the Assad regime. And this group is headed by Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. Al-Jolani, if you look at his brief history, he was a part of Jabhat al-Nusra, which is considered as the Al-Qaeda's branch they opened in Syria. Later on, however, he had a disagreement with the leadership of Al-Qaeda, especially that time led by al-Baghdadi, who was the mastermind behind the development of ISIS, and that is why he left Al-Qaeda and he transformed Jabhat al-Nusra into Jabhat Fatah al-Sham, where main goal of this organization was to have a victory over the entire al-Sham region. Al-Sham region is what we also call as Levant region, which is this area as you can see on the map here, comprising of countries such as Israel, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Cyprus. That means along the coast of Mediterranean Sea, the countries that are situated. Later on in 2017, he changed the name of the group by joining some other smaller factions into HTS, and then he declared that his main goal is not global. His goal is largely focused on the local politics of Syria, and his main goal now is to overthrow the Assad regime and establish Sunni Islamic rule. Now, if you remember, I told you that Bashar al-Assad belonged to the Alawite sect of Shia Islam, while Muhammad al-Julani belonged to the Sunni Islam, and that is why it was also a kind of fight that we are seeing between the two different sects of Islam taking place in this region. Apart from that, you have the Syrian Democratic Forces that is largely led by the Kurdish ethnic groups, which are largely controlling the northeastern part of the Syria, and this group is backed by the United States military, United States Army, and most interestingly, if you talk about this is the region where this group has control over, is where most of the oil reserves of Syria lies. So unless and until US intervenes and decides to share the revenue from the oil exploration of this region, again the economic situation of Syria even now is hard to change because there is a lack of money. That is the main problem, which is cause of discontentment among the population. Apart from that, you have a small other group that is Syrian National Army, made up of the defecting Syrian soldiers in 2011. This is a group that is backed by another major country in the Middle East, that is Turkey, and this group is fiercely opposed both to the Assadist Syria as well as the Kurdish Syrian Democratic Forces. So even when the Assad is gone, it is not that we can see a cohesive coming up of all the major rebel factions. Within them also we can see the inter-fighting or inter-battle. So we have to wait and watch and see that how this entire thing plays out in the near future. Now the question that might be coming into the minds of most of people, that now the Assad is gone, what is going to happen in the Syria? Is it the end of the Syrian civil war? Is it the beginning of a new age, a new progressive age, or a good age where people can do what they want? Individual freedom, liberty is something that can be granted to them. Will we see an increase in the economic affluency of the people here? Now that is a question that cannot be answered in the recent time, in the current time, because a lot of development is happening even now today. But one thing that many experts try to argue, that though Assad was very unpopular among the Syrian people, he was considered as what we can call as a bulwark against the Sunni Islamic fundamentalism. It was the Sunni Islamic fundamentalism which has given rise to ISIS somewhere back in 2013 and 14, which at once tried to swept across the entire Iraq and Syria region and try to establish what we can call as a Sharia rule based system in the entire region. However, now he is gone. As we can see from this map here or this pie chart here, that 74% of Syria's population is made up of Sunni Muslims. Remaining 26% are of minorities which belong to the Alawite group, of which Bashar al-Assad was member of, that is belong to the Shiite sect. Then we have Orthodox Christians are there, we have Druze, we have Roman Catholics, plus many other people who do not identify with any other religion. So once the group led by Jolani, that is STS, come into power, which seems very likely, how they will deal with this minority group is what remains to be seen, because there is a large scale fear that these minority groups might face oppression under the Sunni fundamentalist group if they come into power. So the group, basically the reason behind this is because if you talk about the HTS that has toppled the Bashar al-Assad regime, its history can be traced back to having a violent Al-Qaeda past. As we have discussed in the past slide, it belonged to Jabhat al-Nusra, which was nothing but a part of Al-Qaeda in the Syrian territory. So this is something that is not only a cause of concern in Syria, but also is a cause of concern, and actually it has rattled some nerve in the New Delhi as well, because how now India will establish relation with Syria is we have to see. So on the other hand, if you talk about from the positive perspective, HTS obviously has struck a more liberal note. It has said that we are not against minority groups, we are not trying to oppress or crush any minority in the Syria, rather we will work for the entire Syrian people. And they are also saying that we are not in the favor of having a dominant rule by a single individual, rather we want to build an institution based system in Syria which can move Syria on the path of progress and development. But we have to wait and watch and see that how actually it turns out once they come into power, because many people fear that Syria might be running or going on the path of Afghanistan, but Afghanistan on the Mediterranean. Because if you look the comparison between the Taliban's capture of power in Afghanistan and Syria and this HTS capture of power in Syria, they're similar in nature, because Taliban also were able to topple the entire Afghanistani government, where Afghanistan military basically fled. They opposed, or they basically refused to fight. Same thing has happened in the case of Syria as well. Taliban also, before coming to power, they said that we are more liberal, we are more changed, we will not crush the rebellion, we will not basically oppress the people. But as we have seen, once the Taliban came into power in Afghanistan, again the rights, the freedom that were granted to specifically women, they were withdrawn, they were taken out. And now any girl child cannot learn or cannot go to school after the grade 6. So this is something that we can say is something that might be possible in Syria. We have to wait and watch. Now, as far as the external influence is concerned, now since Assad has fled to Syria, Russia already, Russia has ruled out any kind of active involvement in the latest Syrian crisis, as well as Joe Biden's administration, the US-led administration, which is largely the force behind the Syrian democratic forces led by the Kurds. They also have not shown any signs of any intervention or what they are going to do. Similarly, talk about the upcoming President Donald Trump. He also has posted on his social media handle that US has no business in Syria. We should not intervene. Let the situations play out by itself in the Syria. So even after the coming of the Trump presidency, you might not see any active interest of the US in the Syria. And Iran already has anyway withdrawn its support, and they have taken away their diplomats, their military generals and all from the Syria. So basically Syria is left to the Syrian people as well as the rebel factions that are operating there. As far as the mood of the Syrian public is concerned, they obviously have breathed a sigh of relief after being under the oppressive rule of Assad family over last 5 decades. So obviously they are very, very jubilant, and their activity can be seen as everywhere where you have the Syrian population, Syrian people, they have basically stormed the embassies of different countries, where they have what you can call as the replaced the Syrian flag that was representative of the al-Assad regime by the flag that is representative of the freedom movement or the rebellion against Assad. So this is the flag that is basically a symbol of revolt or symbol of what you can call as a protest against the Assad regime, and that is how the flag has been replaced. If you look at the response to the current prime minister that we have in the Syria, who was the prime minister under the rule of President Assad, he has called for free elections and said that he is continuously in contact with the Al-Julani, who is the leader of S2S, to discuss the peaceful transition of power. There should not be any kind of bloodshed. There should not be any kind of, this coup and all. Rather, there should be a transitional government who should have representation, or which should have representation from all the major factions of the Syria. As far as the Netanyahu is concerned, he obviously is very relieved, because the only way how Iran was able to exert influence on the Hamas, Hezbollah, West Bank, Gaza Strip was through Syria. So once Syria is free from Assad regime, obviously Israel will now, for at least unless and until situations become clear, will breathe a sigh of relief. So Assad's fall was direct result of blows Israel had dealt to Iran and its Lebanese ally Hezbollah, once the linchpin of Assad's security forces pounded by Israel over the last 2 months. And that is exactly correct. The Hezbollah's degradation of power caused by the Israel is major reason why Hezbollah was not able to support this time Bashar al-Assad. If we talk about the French president, he also has given the statement that the barbaric state has fallen, and he paid tribute to the Syrian people. So different kind of responses coming from different countries, different geopolitical leaders. As far as India is concerned, so even during the Assad's rule, India has a very warm and friendly relation with Syria, and in fact, few days back, at least last week itself, the 6th round of India-Syria Foreign Office consultation has taken place in Delhi. And as the statement released by the Ministry of External Affairs of India, it has said that India and Syria enjoy a warm and friendly relations based on historic and civilizational ties. India has been a keen development partner for Syria, is also actively involved in capacity building of the Syrian youth, and both the countries also cooperate on various multilateral forums. Now, once a new government comes into power, what kind of ideology are on which these government work upon, we will have to wait and watch, and based on that, India will have to maybe change its stance or diplomatic relations with Syria. So that is all about this particular video. I hope you got a gist of what has happened in last few weeks in Syria and what looks to be a most possible future for the people of Syria as well as the government of Syria and overall bilateral relations with the India as well. Thank you very much.